Hey, 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 aloha one and all adepts and initiates. Killer Tengon here for day 11 of Applied Intuition. Thus far, we've talked a little bit in terms of kinesthetic intuitive talents. As we look at this in terms of our capabilities to access the very intelligence of the body, discuss some things in terms of it being of all the different intuitive types, psychic, energetic, empathic, it is the most accurate, largely because it has these thresholds that allow us to have an either or answer. So really great in terms of asking questions in terms of yes and no questions with muscle testing and pendulum work. Additionally, as we tap in, like we did yesterday, day 10, into just the general knowingness of the body, where tension exists, and how that can support in guiding our attention in life. Today, we're going to go into that more projective piece now. On all of our intuitive talents, we have a spectrum of more of the feminine, our ability to receive information, to be able to perceive what's happening. On the opposite end of that spectrum, more of the masculine, that tying specifically into our ability to project or to extend our intuitive talents. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about that piece, a little bit more in terms of what that means in terms of the spectrum of feminine and masculine. And we're going to jump straight into an exercise for today. You're going to need your cards. And so go ahead and get your cards right now, because we're going to be using them in just a bit. Mentioning that we wanted to have either a tarot or oracle deck, perhaps even if what you have is available is a traditional deck of cards, that's fine too. What we're going to be doing today is allowing that intuitive talent pass through, project onto, right? Because it's a little bit of both, but project onto and through our body via our more tactile senses, that sense of feel, and specifically be able to then translate directly into our cards and the very cards that we're using. Before we get started, let me just do one last check on all of the things. Okay, looks good. I've been having some computer issues in this last week. Just too much energy flowing out there. In any case, that's why I'm doing a live versus a recorded session today. I'll go ahead and re-record this once I've got my technical issues figured out. However, a little bit more on that in terms of the kinesthetic awareness. And so when we talk about that ability to receive, what we're really talking about are not just the cells of the body, the very particles and atoms, and those having and receiving specific signals, right? There's a certain spin ratio and energy output that they have, and that can be received in terms of the dominant signals that we provide for our body. Now, as a kinesthetic, being my secondary intuitive talent, it's something that I've been able to utilize for things around physical healing, provide new signals that come in to overcome quote unquote the odds and to sway things in a direction that is ultimately in my favor. Just knowing that the receptivity of the molecules, the particles, and the atoms of this physical body are open to receiving the dominant signal as long as the magnitude is large enough. Now, when we talk about that, we really get into this concept of embodiment. And embodiment is the capacity to hold within inside of ourselves a specific frequency, right? Now, as we talked about before, conscious, subconscious, and superconscious mind, we have a lot of stuff buried in the subconscious mind. And so often the dominant signal is not something we are consciously exerting on our body, right? At the same time, we are able to make those shifts and changes as we get really into the very subtle yet profound capacity that accessing our intuitive talents, specifically our kinesthetic awareness, has to enrich and to enhance everyday life. And again, we're talking about that readily and steadily. So if that's the feminine aspect, the capacity to naturally just receive information, the masculine is the ability to translate that, to propel. So for example, one of the things that I had dealt with was neurological disorder. I had seizures growing up. And when I was in junior high school and for a few years after that, I had what was called a juvenile myoclonic jerk. Imagine, if you will, that spasm you have just before you fall asleep, right? You're just starting to fall asleep and your body has a spasm. So I would have that, like, right now, what is it, like 12:30 in the afternoon? I would have it throughout the course of the day. My body would have this involuntary spasm, very much like that jerk. And so I was put on medication throughout my childhood, throughout, adolescence and early adulthood. And so it got to be where I was 21 years old and I had a decision to make. Did I want to continue to take medication for the entirety of my life? And these are, kind of like antipsychotics. It dulls the nervous system. And so often I felt like I was living my life in a haze, walking through a mist of sorts, kind of seeing things, but not necessarily fully experiencing it. Or do I choose to believe in myself, transition off the medication, accepting the risk of what that means, which is, I'm not able to drive for a full year. I go in for periodic checks in terms of EKG and neurological activity. And do I chance that? So by and large, people who have this specific neurological disorder, about 92% of them are unable to transition fully off medication. Those who do will have a reoccurrence of some sort, whether it's a full grand mal seizure or smaller juvenile myoclonic jerks. And for me, I transitioned off. And so I'm part of the 8% of people who are able to fully transition off any kind of treatment for this disorder. And that was terrific because that spurred a lot in terms of where we are today, exploring these intuitive faculties. And indeed, is part of my inspiration in being able to share this with others, because I discovered a lot just because of this pivotal experience in my life. So the physical body, by the very nature of it, is more receptive. And we can create signals, dominant and prominent signals within our physiology, through belief, through emotion, through vision, through energy, through frequency, that can shift, change, alter, and transform everything. Today's activity is in that line. And so, as we discussed, readily and steadily with our intuitive talents. And one of the first things we want to do is just get into a comfortable space. Now, we're going to be doing a card reading for ourselves, or rather, generally begin to use the cards. Some of you out there may be more proficient. You've been using the cards for a while. Others, this may be your first time. For some of you, you might not even have a card deck with you right now, and that's okay. You can play this video back. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to allow the transference of information through our physical atomic body. And we're going to allow that then to move through our body, through our hands, through the cards. Okay. Now, if you've never used the cards, it's a really interesting phenomena, which will be a whole video in and of itself. For all intent and purposes today, we're going to be applying the process, the protocol to being able to access these intuitive talents. First and foremost, get yourself into a comfortable place, which means that you've got space to lay some cards out. Additionally, we're going to be going into that meditative space first to calibrate our mind to the frequency of coherence. Then we're going to set an intention largely about our kinesthetic intuitive awareness. We're going to open our eyes, and then we are going to shuffle the cards. I'm going to shuffle the cards in a way that allows us to feel that the question that we have. After you come out of that, we're going to ask a single question. This question cannot be a yes or no. We want to have a more open question. I'll give examples of that when we get to the question itself. Then we shuffle the cards. Then we pause, we cut the cards, and then we'll do the reading from there. Now, part of that in getting into a more comfortable space, just for me personally, is I have and like to make a ritual out of it. As we really start to talk about our intuitive talents readily and steadily, that part in terms of comfort is key, especially initially. Eventually, it doesn't have to be. Initially, though, we definitely want to create the space for it. We create a subconscious association with the space that we're in and what it is that we're here to do. 2, we want to make a ritual out of it. So taking that could be as simple and as small as our coherence breathing, which is actually pretty large and profound, and can be more so. So when I do my card readings, I go through a whole process. I'm all about the tuning forks. I like to clear my space first, striking with a hammer, and then I tend to go just generally around the space. I go around me through my own field. And as I do so, I am clearing, as we've talked about from the very get go, in terms of our spiritual hygiene and creating a situation that we are just remaining very intentional about. I also like to take it a little step further, as I talked about in the spiritual hygiene piece, clearing with our allies, right? So frequency is an ally, Palo Santo is an ally. And again, part of this ties into the practical piece of clearing a space. The other part of it is that it makes a ritual out of it. The importance of being able to ritualize these things is that we enter a more open, connected space. We are communicating directly that we are desiring to be in a different state, being, and I would say consciousness, and that allows us to then calibrate to a different frequency within inside of ourselves. All right, so that's going to go. I mean, I even got my crystals here. Citrine is one of mine that I really enjoy having around when I do these types of readings, as well as amethyst. Whatever that is for you, have your space, go through the point of ritual, as small as doing our coherence breathing, as large as doing whatever it is that allows you to shift your mind and perspective and energy. Next, going into that breath work in just a moment. And then just allowing ourselves to settle to the fullness, the entirety and totality of our own being, which I invite you to do now. Go ahead and close your eyes, please. And just take a breath. All too often, we can get so caught up in the hustle and the bustle of everyday life. It's nice to have our eyes closed, to center our attention, to connect with the moment and to cohere to the now and into the here. And as we do, breathe easily, breathe normally, breathe naturally. Allowing our attention fully occupy this moment. Breathing now fully into this moment. Noticing the slow passage of breath, the movement of air. Now, quietly setting within inside of yourself an intention to connect with the depth and breadth of our kinesthetic, intuitive awareness. And to allow this transfer through our body onto and through the cards that we will use for this exercise and activity. Allowing the messages flow easily and effortlessly and to be received openly and honestly. So it is. When ready, please feel free to again open your eyes. Now, once more, to engage the world around you. Welcome back. All right. Next, we're going to go into a very simple card reading. Now, to do that, take your deck of cards, right? Whatever it may be, oracle deck, tarot deck, regular deck of cards. I'm going to start off right hand to your chest. We're going to ask ourselves a question. Now, with the questions I ask myself, I like to preface it by saying in my highest, best interest and for the greatest good. Okay. So we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to do a single card and then have that be our card of context. That's what has the dominant, it's representative of the dominant energy that we are dealing with. Okay. And so what I'm going to ask right now is it in my highest best interest, or rather in my highest best interest and for the greatest good? How can I best spend the rest of my day? You can ask whatever type of question that you want. I would recommend saying that aloud or quietly 3 times. Highest best interest and for the greatest good. How can I best spend the rest of my day? Do the last one quietly with inside of myself. Once you feel that question has been transferred, you're going to shuffle. You're going to shuffle as much as feels right. As you shuffle, if you've got a couple that flop, put them off to the side because generally speaking, there's energy to them. Yeah, you want to shuffle in whatever way, shape, or form feels right. I like to go through several different types of shuffles. Still holding in my mind, heart, and especially body this question, allowing things to transfer your subconscious mind through the physical body. Knowing that a single card best represent what it is that presents itself as its answer. Now, when you feel like you are done, go ahead and do one last one of these. Okay. Now, I'm going to take that deck face down. I have it up here so you can see it. You're going to take your non-dominant hand. For me, it's the left. And cut wherever that is. And take whatever card is on the top and place it down. Now, what we've done is we've allowed ourselves to center into this place of connectivity. Allow ourselves to clear ourselves so that we can be very focused and coherent, opening up passages of intuitive awareness to be transferred and then translated through our hands, fingers, and physical body. Now, go ahead and flip your card. Okay. Once you got your card, go ahead and just take a moment to look at it. One of the things that I like about our cards, whether it's something that's familiar or something different, is that we can look at it in different ways. What I like to do first with my card is just hold it. And I just look at it and I gaze at it for just a moment and I look at whatever pops out at me most. I take a moment to acknowledge it. Next, I like to go through a soft gaze. This is looking at the card, looking my eyes, not quite cross-eyed, going in that direction. And then just having a relaxed gaze and letting whatever the card has to communicate to come forward. Lastly, I like to just close my eyes for a moment. Feel into my body, whatever may be coming up and out in terms of messages and sensations. Okay. Now, once we've gone through that process, we've gone into a multi-stage process, how to ready our body, how to work with the intelligence of the body, to allow whatever messages now to come forth in a way that is clear from here on out, which is terrific. Now we've got a lot of information. We've been able to sense into things. One of the things that I like to do, and this can actually preface beforehand, after, and or both, is then I like to muscle test it, right? If we did an open-ended question with the cards, I like levels of discernment. I like to clarify my senses. And so right now, looking at this card with Four of Cups, first thing I noticed was the cups themselves, that it was a period of replenishment. As I did the soft gaze, then water, so emotions, getting more low of things and that which I hold and have held, aspect of fulfillment that comes into play, refilling my own cup and being able to do so in a way that is meaningful emotionally. Now, I want to clarify that. And then I'll come back into, is it in my highest best interest and for the greatest good to receive the messages of fulfillment and restoration from this card, right? And so as a refresher, with our muscle testing, dominant hand's the anchor, non-dominant is a tester, linking up, calibrate, show me a yes, show me a no, show me a yes, show me a no. Is it in my highest best interest and for the greatest good to interpret the messages of this card in terms of fulfillment and replenishment? Yes. Are there any other messages beyond what I have stated? No. And actually both fingers popped out on that one. So that is my message for the card. And that is a way that we can begin to utilize our kinesthetic intuitive talents. Now, as I mentioned at the very start of it, with the end in mind, we begin with concepts of clearing. Once that's done, we now want to transition from this altered state of consciousness is effectively what we've put ourselves into. Altered state of consciousness back into one that is more equipped to engage the world around us. And so this is where we want to close this ritual, right? And that can be as simple as, some of the shorter versions for me is, and so it is. That is a phrase that I bring something to a close with. We can go through our clearing statements, right? Kyo sets the intention for enlightened consciousness to flow through, to experience the purity of consciousness, so on and so forth. We want to bring this to a close because the thing about ritual is it clearly communicates to ourself, to our subconscious mind, and especially to our body that this portion is done. Because if we go back out into the world and hop into a car after being in an altered state of consciousness, we're not as sharp as we could be. And so we want to be able to bring this to a close. And once that closure comes, it signals to ourself, to our body, that it is. And so go ahead, and I highly recommend using this whole process as a protocol. Have your space where you do these exercises in, right? Go into a place where you are now being able to create a ritual around it, an opening and eventually a closing. Coherence breathing, set your intention, perform the exercise, participate in the activity, receive messages, or do the energetic work associated with that. Come back into everyday life by bringing a closing ritual at the end. That is it for now, though. I felt like we've done a lot. Great job. All right. That is it for now, though. Love and aloha. Take care and ahuiho.